Hello, everybody, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your storyteller extraordinaire and master of lore. For today's episode, which is episode 2, we're going to be covering plots and NPCs. Well, a little bit of NPCs, anyways. There's going to be some key points that you want to consider when putting together a plot, regardless of whatever kind of setting you're looking for. The number one thing you're always going to want to do, whether you're playing Pathfinder, Shadowrun, Lore Master, or Role Master, excuse me, is ask your players what sounds like fun. What ask them what kind of a story they're interested in, and also what kinds of characters that they want to play. As the feedback that you get from your players is going to help you put together better and more interesting stories, more engaging things, and ideally, hopefully, help you put together something that's going to be fun for not only you but your players as well. Uh, having them having them inform you as to what kinds of characters they want to play will help you put together your plot structure and your encounters accordingly too. Say your players want to put together something more skill oriented. Let's use Pathfinder as just a nice solid set example. Say they don't really have much in the way of tankiness. They have a couple of rogues, a bard, and a wizard, and let's go ahead and say one fighter. There's not a whole lot of healing in the mix there, and uh, depending on how the players put together their rogues, if they're focusing more on skills rather than skills like interactions, perceptions over their stealth, they may not be the sneakiest bunch of characters. It's kind of a weird and unique mix, but knowing what they're putting together will help you put together a better plot. Also, you could probably advise one or two of them, hey, maybe somebody roll a different character or something. But regardless, we'll do an episode, maybe even a series on putting together better characters for something for players to consider. Anyways, once you have that feedback from your group, you can move on to the rest of the plot. Now, when it comes to the putting together a plot or an adventure, you kind of want to get an idea of how long it's going to be. Is it going to be a one shot adventure, a story that goes on for a few sessions, or a long running multi session epic? Um, Generally, for these longer games, you can actually do a mix of these different things, have little one shot side adventures, have little side engagements and activities that may take a session or two while you still have this larger overarching plot that runs throughout the campaign. And you can even find little ways to tie in some of these little one shots and little short run adventures that go into the main plot. Generally, running a mix like that for these longer campaigns makes the world feel a bit more alive and more diverse, and goes back to that idea of not railroading your players and making them feel like the adventures on rails. Now, when you put these things and get these ideas together for that really awesome idea you may have for your plot, your core idea, and your core concept, draw from other sources. Draw from books, TV, history, mythology. Use all these different sources and ideas and concepts to fuel your own stories. Have them help put together these different things to make your stories more unique. Um, Now, for say, let's go with start off with a one-shot adventure. For a one-shot adventure, uh, the plot, the story tends to be a lot simpler and doesn't have as many steps, but that doesn't mean that a one-shot story or adventure can't be interesting. Um, as an example, some time ago in a setting that I've put together and am still building on and putting together, a random little side story had cropped up. One of my players decided that they were going to go through and explore this pawn shop that they were using as a front for their activities. a little spy ring, a group of agents working on behalf of an empire in a steampunk high fantasy sort of setting. And he ended up rolling a natural 20 on a perception check going through the pawn shop, and just hit on this idea. Let's have him find a cursed object, and he picks up this little jade figurine. It's this misshapen lump sitting on a ordinary looking square base, and what he had found was called the figurine of Nemathrax. Basically, it's a cursed item that houses an entity that feeds on intelligent creatures fulfilling their desires. Basically, it creates little pocket dimensions, illusory spaces where it gives them absolutely everything they desire. And it's an entity that doesn't view itself as evil, but it is parasitic in nature, and it traps these beings within these realms. The longer they're there, the harder it is to extract them, and the more beings it feeds on, the stronger it gets, the better it's able to lure other creatures in. So, kind of a dicey situation, and the players or the other players eventually found him. They rolled poorly on noticing that he was missing and noticing that there was something wrong with him. And another player thought, well, if I'm going to free him, he just needs to not be holding onto the gem. So he went to knock the gem out of his hands, and when he touched it, he got sucked in as well. Their corporeal bodies were still there, but they were becoming insubstantial. In particular, I believe my friend is running a bard, and so the bard was becoming more and more incorporeal as time went on, and so they get into the sorceress scrawls out a wards of protection to keep their minds from being ensnared, and enacts a quick little ritual to get them into the gem. So they go through this long stone hallway, and the level of silence in this place was just beyond oppressive and beyond heavy. There was just an absolute absence of sound. They could talk, but the sounds of their voices wouldn't carry. And over every single little stone, every single archway, doorway, there was this symbol that just kept repeating and repeating. And they go down the hall into this larger rounded antechamber with two other doors on opposite ends. And this being materializes in front of them, is fairly androgynous, can't tell if it's man or woman, and really it's actually neither male or female. And it states simply to them that they're not allowed to disturb other guests. These guests are fine, but perhaps you'd like to check this adjoining chamber. This chamber here will provide you all the information you would ever need on those that have wronged you. Singling out one of the other players, a gunslinger, whose family has a feud going with another family. He failed his will saves and almost got drawn into it until the sorceress dispelled the image in front of them. So they go down through each of these doors, find each player's character. The other players have to make will saves to try to pull themselves out of things. And the bard, who they ended up releasing first because he was most in danger, uh, dude just kept rolling good that night. Rolled another nat 20 for identifying what this was and what this creature was, and calls out the name Namathrax and says he's willing to make a deal. And essentially the deal struck was let them go, but he'll feed Namathrax because they're a spy ring. They're a ring of agents. Sometimes they gotta get rid of people. They gotta just let people kind of disappear, fade away into the night. So Namathrax took the deal because it got to eat, it got to snack a little bit, and the this particular cursed figurine is now bound to the bard, who's nominally in charge of the spy ring. It was this weird, neat little off the cuff side adventure, this little one shot story that didn't have a whole lot to do with the overarching plot, but they got a neat little item out of it, something that's going to help them. And it ties in kind of nicely into the whole thing with their spy ring. And everybody came away with this having a lot of fun. Now, this wasn't anything I had prepared ahead of time, but putting in that detail and building everything around this really helped to make this off the cuff little random one shot adventure work better and flow that much more smoothly for the players. They all enjoyed the hell out of themselves. They had a lot of fun with it. It was good stuff. It felt pretty good having them tell me that they enjoyed it. Oh, side note that brings up another point for me. At the end of every adventure, get feedback from your players. Like if they're having a great time, they will tell you. If they didn't have that great a time, some of them might tell you, but definitely ask them. Ask them, hey, did you have fun? What did you have the most fun with? What can I improve on? What do you think could be changed? And they'll let you know. They may, depending on the friends, they may put it gently. They may not, but that feedback will be helpful, even if it's just them telling you, hey, good job, you're on the right track. That's important to know too. So definitely make sure you check with your players about those things. Now, back to this point I'm making. This was a simple story. It's an ancient being. It's not tied to any particular higher, lower, or middle plane as far as the alignments and morality goes. In fact, it's a being from beyond the planes, and uh, it wasn't an inherently evil creature. Well, evil in the most direct sense, like evil for evil's sake. It was simple. This story is where this creature traps two of the players. The rest of the party has to go in, save them, and draw them out. Simple, easy, and it was fun. Now, um, now when it comes to antagonists, remember when I said the Namathrax wasn't necessarily full on evil, wasn't just evil for evil's sake? That's something you want to bear in mind when you're putting together protagonists, whether it's a one shot adventure or a long running epic. You want to think about these protagonists, or antagonists rather. Sorry about that. You want to put together these antagonists with a bit of thought, because other than your players, they are the driving force for the story. You have to have an idea about what their goals and desires are and how they go about achieving those goals. In this case with Namathrax, its goals are simple. It wants to feed. It feeds on other creatures' desires being fulfilled, or at least that sense of fulfillment is what it devours. So it ensnares creatures who pick up its figurine. They take a look at that misshapen lump and they realize, oh, that lump's not misshapen at all. That's me sitting quietly at a desk. A quiet life, out of the limelight, out of the spotlight. Still an important position. I'm issuing orders. People are going out and carrying out the will of the emperor and following my orders quietly, but I don't need to be lauded and thrown into the spotlight. I can just stay here quietly, out of everybody's way, and it instantly knows people's desires when they fail their will saves, and it draws them in so that it can feed on them. And it's simple, but it's interesting, and it makes the villain a bit more memorable. If you just go with the antagonist that's just evil for evil's sake, just kicks puppies, murders orphans, burns down churches, just because that's not compelling. I mean, it's somebody that the players won't mind defeating. They won't have a problem going out and trying to fight this person, but that's not quite so compelling. That's not. You can certainly have villains like that, but it seems to always work out better when the villains are a little bit more complicated. And hell, the antagonists don't even necessarily have to be villains. They can be good people that are just at cross purposes with the players. They can be, well, let me think of an example here. You can take a paladin, for example, and make him the antagonist for a story. The paladin may have been duped somehow or under some kind of a curse where he, for some reason, suspects innocent people of being deranged members of a cult. These are people sacrificing children to dark gods. They are slavering awful monstrosity. They put up a good innocent front. They look innocent, but you just know dark and foul desires lurk deep within their hearts. And this paladin believes this, and due to a curse or whatever effect may be upon them, and just goes about conducting an inquisition, just brutally rooting out these heresies and wiping out these cultists as quickly and effectively as he can. Now, maybe he does so with mercy. He's still a paladin. He's not going to torture them endlessly, but he will try gentler ways of trying to get information out of people, perhaps creating zones of truth where people can't lie, and certainly seeing that these people are telling him the truth, he might be presented with some confusion about why that is, or maybe finds ways of rationalizing it, telling himself he's on the right path because he's a paladin. He hasn't lost his powers yet. How, if he was doing the wrong thing, how does he still have his powers? How uh, he must certainly be on the right track. Just somebody who doesn't think about tries not to think about it or rationalizes their actions to themselves and why things are coming out in a way they don't expect, and they just continue on rooting out this corruption. That presents an interesting challenge to the players, figuring out why the hell this paladin has gone nuts. If any of the other players are paladins or clerics or good aligned people, they probably will not want to just immediately annihilate this antagonist. They will want to try to resolve things peaceably. But convincing this paladin that something's wrong with him is going to be difficult because he's spent time rationalizing his actions to himself and believes himself to be so thoroughly to be on the right path. It'll present some interesting challenges in whether it's combat or social encounters. And not only that, but figuring out the source of this curse or effect on the paladin will also produce some interesting challenges. Either you can still turn this into a one-shot adventure. It's a cursed sword that he found. The paladin believes it's a holy blade, but it's actually a holy blade that has been corrupted and is now possessed by an infernal spirit that's quietly manipulating him, whispering little things into his head, easing his doubts and fears, presenting reasonable explanations. Oh, that peasant was clearly a cultist, but he must just not have known what had corrupted him. Poor soul. At least his suffering is now at an end. We can perform these last rites and sacraments and send their souls up onto the higher planes for judgment, where whatever deity may have some mercy upon them. Uh, or it could be something more complicated. There could be a little puppet master out there creating these situations, using these curses, corrupting heroes to sow chaos, discord, and confusion for any number of goals. But the point is, think about your antagonists a little bit. Flesh them out a little bit more than just being evil, and think about different unique ways that you can make more interesting antagonists. They don't, like I said, they don't always need to be evil. They can be lawfully aligned. You could go with some kind of arbiter or bounty hunter, or some extraplanar force of law and order that descends down upon the world, doesn't care what the circumstances are or mitigating factors. The law is the law. These people have broken it. They need to be punished. And for good aligned characters, that will also present more moral conundrums. Yes, they're not necessarily wrong, but in their hearts because they're good aligned, maybe lawful, or even chaotic good characters will see this as a fundamental problem and be more inclined to oppose this. They might have to be careful how they oppose a force such as this, an extraplanar, lawful, neutral, hardly aligned force would be something you want to tiptoe carefully around because extraplanar creatures tend to have a lot of support from various factors and factions. So, once you've figured out your antagonist, what their goals are, why they're doing what they're doing, figure out how they go about accomplishing their goals. Going back to our paladin example, maybe the paladin um, goes to a temple of his own faith or a similarly aligned faith and raises these concerns and rouses together as many people as he can to help support him as he conducts this inquisition. Uh, this paladin may be powerful, but it's still just one person. He's going to need, especially if it's a town or city he's never been to before, they're going to need to have people that know the lay of the land, that know all the other people, people that can point out all the different strange happenings, or, oh, that person over there is very suspicious. They're going to need information. They're going to need to have support in helping round up these different people and rooting out this cult, especially if it's as deeply entrenched as he fears. So we can therefore assume he's going to have at least an information network. It may not be the most complicated one, but it's going to be people that know the area and know the people around it. So they'll notice strangers coming into town and they'll alert the paladin to these strangers because these could just be people passing through, or they're mercenaries or brigands or awful people hired by the cult, or maybe even duped by the cult into doing their dirty work for them. So the paladin could end up being alerted to the player's presence pretty quickly in this instance. Now, potentially, it could just be a bunch of peasants that he has riled up, but if he's got peasants on his side, city folk, then he will probably have some of the city guard on his side. Maybe not all of them, but he'll at least have some capable people that he can trust, especially members of his own church. Maybe not the highest forms of leadership. They may end up opposing the paladin because they've overseen their flock. They've been tending to their spiritual faith. They're not suffering under the effects of this curse, so they can tell that the people the paladin has been rounding up, maybe the first couple, maybe he might be onto something. Maybe he's right, but at a certain point, especially if for the story the bloodshed and body count has been mounting and rising, the upper echelons of the church or temple's leadership would certainly come into opposition to what the paladin's doing. So, by thinking the story over, you created a couple of different factions. We've established a paladin's methodology and also how it's affected other groups within the community. The paladin, whether he realizes it or not, is basically stirring up a mob, stirring up, an inquisition. Kind of like think like the stories of the Salem witch trials, where it's just built into this wave of fear and paranoia that just spread and infected the rest of the populace. And this fear and paranoia can serve as a confirmation bias to the paladin. Clearly, there's something wrong here. Look at what's happening in this town. All these awful things keep happening, and we keep uh, finding cultists, people who are suspect. And, and with this, we can also create another faction. The the town's leadership, not just the temple, but say the mayor or governor for the town or city. They're overwhelmingly concerned about this, but they're afraid of going against the church because, say, a quarter or a third of the city's populace is now rallying around this paladin, and in their fervor are dangerous to oppose, speaking out against this paladin and his inquisition is stepping into dangerous territory. So we come up with a couple of different ways the players can get involved into this. We actually have three different ways. One, the paladin approaches them because he's heard about this troop of mercenaries coming in. Two, the church could potentially have noticed them, or if any of the players share a faith in common with the church or the paladin, when they go to the temple, the uh, the temple's high priest, bishop, whatever title, may talk to them because they're an outsider and thinks, well, these are outsiders. This is a member of my faith. Maybe this person and the rest of his companions can help solve this problem, help figure out what's going on, and find out what's befallen this paladin. And then we also have the city's mayor or governor, whatever, the person that helps to run and maintain the place. They may approach the players, although they may be more apt to do so in secret, through messengers, inviting them to meet with an intermediary to deliver the contract to them or to hire them discreetly in order to deal with this paladin. Now, the mayor may just want the paladin to just be killed and dumped in a ditch somewhere. Whereas the high priest would be more interested in saving the paladin. Although, at the rate the paladin's going, even though the paladin believes he's doing the right thing, he's still committing evil deeds. He's racking up all this evil within his heart as a result of his actions. That by the point he realizes, oh crap, he hasn't done the right thing at all, the knowledge would just crush him and utterly destroy him and cause him to fall utterly from grace, possibly becoming a blackguard. Uh, I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but I'm hoping that as I talk, you can see how you can turn this, start off with such a simple idea, an interesting idea where a paladin is the antagonist, the paladin's reasons for doing things, and you can see how that just spider webs out into this larger, more, not necessarily complex, as all these ideas are simple. It's only complex in the sense that there are so many different ways that this is interconnected, especially when you plan and just build this right. Um, it it goes a lot towards making a much better a much better told and a much more interesting story that you can use to present unique challenges to the players. Because sure, say these are decently seasoned and experienced adventurers, say a group of level 8 characters. They're going to mow through mobs of peasants pretty easily if they so choose, but doing so, especially knowing that something is wrong and that they're being misled, presents quite a few moral conundrums to the characters. Do they want to just start hacking through the city guard and all these innocent people? That leaves a pretty bad mark on their reputation there and probably will alter their alignments a little bit. But at the same time, they can't just let themselves be beat down mercilessly by this mob. And the mob will do it too. They'll beat the ever loving crap out of them and bring them forward for questioning and eventually execution. So they have to think about how they go about things. They may not be able to avoid bloodshed, but maybe they can at least avoid slaughtering dozens upon dozens of innocent people. So, that's everything today for plots and NPCs. We're talking about this in some pretty broad terms still, but like I talked about in the first episode, you start out broad and bring it in a little bit, and then bring it in a little bit further, and you go inwards and inwards till during this series we get to a point where we start talking about finer and finer details, putting together individual counters, specifically how to build different kinds of NPCs and antagonists. And next episode, which will be our third, and I'm looking forward to it, is going to focus more on NPCs and putting together better story ideas. Well, Yeah, it'll kind of be the same as today's episode, but it's going to focus more on NPCs and how you can use that to interact in different aspects of a plot, or to create different types of plots. So, with that said, I'm Jordan. I have been your resident lore master and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.